Hello and welcome to the Korean Beauty Show podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Lee, Kbeauty expert and founder of Style Story, where you can learn, shop and explore the world of Korean skincare. On today's episode, I have a really special episode for you, and that is because I sat down with another veteran of the beauty industry and of Kbeauty, and that is Sarah Chung from Landing International. Now, Sarah has worked with over 300 brands and retailers since 2003, and one of the Kbeauty giants that she has worked with was Amore Pacific. And believe it or not, she started working with them before they were even known as Amore Pacific. Back in those days, they were just called Amore. So Sarah is a font of knowledge when it comes to all things Kbeauty and has seen firsthand the explosion of, Korean culture, skincare brands, and brands in general across the last couple of years. So she has a really unique and interesting perspective on the growth of the industry. So we sat down and had a chat about all of that, plus where she thinks the industry is going. Now, one of the really exciting things that she has been working on is a new app. So she has been developing a B2B web and mobile tool, lots of tools actually, that help emerging beauty and wellness brands succeed at retail. And one of her big areas of focus has actually been indie brands. So Sarah herself has been really instrumental in the global indie beauty movement, particularly in North America. So I hope that you will enjoy this chat. I had so much fun talking to Sarah. She knows so many things, so please enjoy and make sure that you give her a follow on social media as well. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the Korean Beauty Show podcast. Super excited to have you on.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm so excited to be here.
Excellent. So I have, so many questions for you as someone that has been working in the space. And you were obviously born here in Korea before you moved back to the States. So I guess I would love to know a little bit more about your background and how you got started in beauty in the first place.
Yes. So as you mentioned, I was born in Korea and we immigrated unsuccessfully to the US because we immigrated when I was 6 and then we went back when I was 11. And I grew up for the rest of my academic life, like in Korea until university. And then I went to the US. And pretty soon after I graduated school, I moved to New York and I started doing consulting work in the area of market research. And I would say a few years after I started that, I started doing business plans for beauty brands. And so I stumbled across it because a former coworker of mine was starting a beauty brand. And this was just at the time, that was like 2004, 2005. When Sephora was on the scene and department stores used to be the only game in town of where brands could launch. And it was very cost prohibitive because it used to be like back in the day, you would pay like $200,000 for like a counter at a single location. And so there weren't indie brands. There were just no channels. And then Sephora came along and then Ulta came along and there were a lot more avenues for smaller brands. And then it created an M&A landscape for brands because there were brands getting bigger. And so I actually stumbled on a niche for myself where I was helping brands to raise money to go into retail. So I've been in the beauty industry since 2005. And it just happened that one of my early clients was Amore Pacific, which at the time was, a chaebol in Korea, but
still
in
is.
the US,
Yep.
yes, at the time, not much has changed. But it used to be Amore, where no one used it. It was like things that your mom would use, and they completely rebranded and created this line for the U.S. market called Amore Pacific. And I worked with them in a consulting capacity for about 5 years. And that was my first foray into Kbeauty. And I think I never imagined it would get so big and be, such a huge part of my career. And even in the beauty industry, I don't consider myself, to be honest, a beauty aficionado. And so it feels like happenstance that I sort of have built a career on beauty and Kbeauty and find myself here today on a Korean beauty podcast.
I feel like so many people have that story, particularly when it comes to Kbeauty. And I think maybe part of that is because, this whole industry has just sort of sprung up from seemingly nowhere, although obviously the people that were involved in making Kbeauty what it is today wouldn't say that. So I guess maybe you've kind of already answered my next question, but I just wanted to understand a little bit more of how much of a role did Korean beauty, maybe philosophies or products, play in your life? But maybe before you got into it and after, obviously you would have been impacted by working with Amore Pacific.
Yes. Well, I think in general, and what I didn't realize, because I just think it's normal because that's what I grew up with. But then later being in the beauty industry and then seeing the beauty habits of people that, didn't grow up in the same environment that I did, I realized that Korean beauty regimens and philosophy in terms of layering, in terms of serums. And that's something that I grew up with. Like even my mom, she really, would press upon toning, moisturizing. And she would do like the egg packs at home, and she would do treatments with like cucumbers. And so I just thought, okay, that's what everyone does. And it wasn't until like I got to college and saw like, maybe like how a roommate would shower and like wash their face with a shampoo or something, and that I was like, oh my God, like, is that what people are doing? So I definitely feel like I had that base where your skin is very important. You take care of it. You apply SPF religiously, and I think that in the way that Kbeauty was introduced to me when I was growing up in Korea, and you may have heard this, where we didn't like Korean products.
Yeah.
We wanted Japanese products. We wanted French products, and those were like the high quality. And that's something I think that's been a major shift, because now people who used to say like, oh no, we only want the wedges, like now they want domestic brands. And I think that's a trend that I'm so proud of, that we're creating things that we want to use and that have become a global standard of excellence and innovation. And I think that it's kind of come full circle in terms of being proud of where we came from and being involved in this industry.
100%. And definitely, I mean, I remember even when I first started in Kbeauty, it was like the stuff that was sold at the 백화점, like department stores, they were all foreign brands. And now you see a really good representation in all of the offline stores of the domestic brands as well. So definitely I've noticed that change even since I've been here. I guess I'm super curious then to know, what were the beauty trends when you first got started working in the industry?
I feel like there was a lot of peels. That's what I remember, because when I first started out, it was like around the era of cosmeceutical brands. And so it was a lot about science. There was a lot of like very high active ingredients. And then there were, a reliance on moisturizer. So I didn't feel that the emphasis was on sort of like the nourishment side. So like the serums, the moisturizing toners, that I feel like the ingredients that Kbeauty is really known for. So like the hyaluronic acids, the different vitamins, and then, even like things like snail mucin, bee venom, we've kind of done it all. But I feel like that was a shift, because like ingredient wise, we were really science-based, and it was a lot of harsher products. Whereas Kbeauty, I do think that in general, they tend to be gentler. And it's not like a heavy layer of cream. It's more about like layering multiple layers of moisturizing. So I think that was a bit of a shift.
Yeah, I noticed the same. I mean, growing up in Australia, definitely it was all about like dousing any skin issues with like the harshest ingredients you could find, and then just piling on the makeup to cover up anything left over. Whereas I feel like thanks to Kbeauty, that approach has really changed, and people have understood that like your skin and the condition of your skin should come first, and then makeup can enhance what you have underneath. So I've definitely noticed that as well. well. I think you've already answered my question then about the main changes that you've seen with Kbeauty. But is there any like big ticket thing that you're like, Kbeauty used to be about this and now I see it going this way? Is there anything like that?
Well, I think just as an industry, even from like, let's say 2015 to today, I think for like the first 4 years, the innovation coming out of Korea was like, it was just like one after the other. And I think you've seen the stats of like, at one point, there were 8,000 new brands a month. It was that crazy. And then being on this side where I was representing K beauty brands to US retail buyers, it was literally like, anything K beauty, they were open, what's new, what's next. And I think, as the industry has matured overseas, and also quite frankly, as the companies themselves have sought other avenues for revenue. I think it's kind of shifted to become more of like the world's cosmetic manufacturing hub than it has been about the brands themselves. So I still think that there is a lot of innovation in the industry, but it doesn't seem like it's really under the guise of K beauty anymore. And it used to be you would see like, something new from K beauty. And then a year later, you would see kind of like the big name US brands with a similar product. But now they're pretty much launching at the same time. So I think the shift is like, I don't feel like the wow factor is enough or doesn't exist for it to be the competitive point. It really now has to be about brand building. And when, you know, you build a brand with consistency and with a relationship with your consumer base, and you're like building your fans one by one. And I think that's really has to be the shift and focus of K beauty brands, because I think in Korea the mentality is a bit different. It's very much like, okay, what's like the coolest new thing, and it could be like a one product story. Whereas the US, we still do want a regimen, we still want a full assortment, we still do want like a brand story and for it to go deeper.
Definitely. We've been talking about that a lot on the podcast about some of the different global brands that are manufacturing here. But certainly in the American market, I think Kbeauty is not enough to sell a brand if there's not something more. Whereas when it was first, being talked about in the mainstream media, it was so different and so like crazy that got a lot of brands over the line just because it was a talking point. So I've definitely noticed that. So I guess that you're answering all of my questions in advance.
Oh, okay. We're just in like a nice groove where I'm
I know
anticipating what you're gonna ask.
I love it. So you've touched a little bit about the fact on a little bit about the fact that you help brands and Korean brands as well. But tell us about BeautyFluent.
Yes. So BeautyFluent is a new product that we launched earlier in April because, as you mentioned, I don't just work with Korean brands. We work with indie brands of all shapes and sizes. And so whether it's just like a wellness brand, whether it's a female-owned brand, a minority-owned brand. And I think the biggest struggle for smaller brands is being able to compete once they're in retail. Because once you're in a physical space, it has very specific requirements. And one of them is to train adequately the sales staff. And that's something that's very difficult when you're at a retailer like Ulta and there's 1,300 stores across this huge geographic space of America. And so you see that a lot of brands ultimately fail because they haven't acted quickly enough to engage that sales advisor to be a fan. And they also don't have the resources to be connecting with them or communicating with them in any kind of regular basis. So the idea behind BeautyFluent was really can we level the playing field? Whether you're a big brand or you're a small brand, you're going to have access to be able to communicate the benefits of your brand and product to the person who's representing it to the customer. And I think that we have seen so much great feedback, particularly from the beauty advisors, because number one, they are beauty enthusiasts and they want to learn more. They're hungry to learn more. So they love access to all this information. And also they love finding out the brand story. Who's behind the brand? Why do they create it? Give me more than I can just read on the packaging. And so we launched, as I said earlier this year, we work with brands that are sold at places like Ulta and JCPenney because those are the places with like, large number of doors and really need that support.
Sure. So you work with then a whole lot of different brands as part of your business. And how did you move, I guess, from being a consultant with Amore Pacific into setting up this whole brand, this whole business in the States? Tell me about that.
Yes. So I think I had been a consultant for so long at that point. I think it was over 12 years. And I really wanted to build something because the great thing about being a consultant is like you're in and out and you're not responsible for the results. But the bad thing is you're not really creating anything that will sustain over time. And so I thought about, okay, what do I know how to do? What do I want to do? And it really, I had built a technology product before that had to, that we were using in my consultancy. And I wanted to create a technology product that would help this cross border work in relation to what I knew. And that was at the time, beauty products. So again, I kind of stumbled across it. I don't feel like there was like any real grand plan. And I think what enabled me to succeed in that element was I didn't have to sell myself. I could be a consultant to the retailer and I could be a consultant to the brand. And that fit for me because I think that I'm actually not a great salesperson when I'm having to sell something that, comes from me. But if you want me to represent your interests and help you understand the value of another party, that's kind of like where I think my comfort zone is. And then it just kind of expanded on like, what are the services that people need? What are the white space in being able to succeed in retail? And that's really how we created BeautyFluent because we were like, okay, there's a huge area that no one is addressing. And we have the relationships with the retailers, we have the brands. So let's just build it ourselves.
That's amazing. And it's so interesting how many people didn't set out necessarily to have a career in beauty. I think that's a really common thing is that people were doing something else. I mean, I used to be a lawyer. I definitely did not dream of working in the industry. And certainly career was not on my list of destinations for my career either. But I think sometimes you realize that you've picked up more than you thought you knew about lots of different things. And you can actually play this role in connecting. And I guess having that experience of having, been raised here in Korea and then moving to the States, it's just like all of these things from, I guess, your background enables you to play that role a lot easier, to link people together. I think that's a really exciting thing too, particularly with Kbeauty in general, is just the way that people are getting to experience so much more of, Korea, and getting to learn a lot about like all the different philosophies, and seeing Kbeauty become part of this global beauty trend has been pretty cool, like for me personally, and I'm sure for you as well, to see, all of these brands grow and flourish in a new market and then impacting on what other brands and retailers and things like that are doing. Like the indie beauty space, like you said, that didn't used to be a thing. And now I feel like it's, a lot easier for people to start their own brand, more easy than it's ever been before. So I guess, how has the pandemic impacted, the work that you do, and how do you think BeautyFluent can help bridge that gap?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pandemic really slowed things down in terms of in-store, but I think what it did actually when it started to lift and the vaccines were more readily available is that it really reinforced that people um, love shopping for beauty in person because it's a very sensorial thing. You want to touch it, you want to smell it. Um, you want to see textures. And so I think that in-store is stronger than ever. But I think that what it did was also make us more conscious about, how things are being tested, how things are being distributed. And so I think where the natural flow into Beauty Fluent has been is like to be able to see the textures without having to open up every product.
Right.
And also to be able to be trained without, having to have too much exposure to the product in and it's hard for people because they weren't sampling for a while. They weren't, actually even like allowing people to open up products in store. So I think BeautyFluent kind of was able to play a role of like, okay, this is what the color shade would look like. This is, swatching. This is what the texture is, and so it really kind of dovetailed nicely into what we were facing at the time. And I think now, it's like consumers are still very, very wary and conscious about like how they experience things in stores. And so we're just really trying to support the beauty advisor, deal with the customers in the way that they feel most comfortable.
Definitely. I mean, we've had the same thing here in Korea as well throughout the pandemic, that testers were sort of all covered up in plastic. And it really does, as a person that's wanting to try, you go in store because you want to try these things and want to understand what's going to be right for you. It does kind of create just that extra layer of difficulty, in knowing what's going to be right for you. And it takes away a lot of the fun of it as well. But, now that everything is kind of lifting, but that's such a genius way of letting everyone still experience what they're going in store for in the first place, the swatches, the shades, all of those kind of things. I mean, that's why we go in the first place, is to, to experience all of that and to know in advance. And particularly for staff, that's literally their job. So I'm really, really curious to know, as someone that has obviously worked in the industry, worked with so many great brands throughout your career, is there one beauty tip or trick that you feel like changed your skin or changed your makeup that you would like to share?
Yes. I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I really feel like double cleansing and cleansing oils really changed my skin. And I'm not saying that I was not washing my face properly before, but I think because I have dry skin, but also tend to be on the oilier side, washing with oils actually helped me so much, like not to dry out as much and actually to control the oil. So I feel like that's something that I would never give up, that's something that really like stuck with me. And I believe in double cleansing. I believe in cleansing oils and nourishing your skin while you're cleansing. So that's definitely something I would say that has changed my skin.
I could have given the same answer myself. Honestly, I harp on about it on the show all the time, but it just really, really does. It improves so many things about your skin, the texture. Like I was saying this, I think just last week, that it's shocking how much is still left on your face if you only cleanse once, whether it comes to like washing sunscreen off or makeup or anything like that. So yeah, that is a really great one. And I'm glad that we are on the same page with that one as well. So when it comes to, I guess, the trends, and I'd be really keen to hear your opinions, particularly as it relates to offline in the States. Where do you see the trends moving in 2023?
So I've been on a lot of panels and sort of like participating in different discussions about what is the future. And I think right now it seems a lot about technology.
Right. Okay.
It used to be about, certain products or trends and brand categories. But now it seems like, especially with, the pandemic being over and really in-store coming back stronger than ever, we're exploring a lot of different ways how we can use technology. And this idea of how do we use technology to make our shopping experience easier, faster, more accurate. And also this idea of, now it's not just about online or in person, but it's also adding like a virtual element of it and kind of having this like multi-dimensional shopping experience. I think people are talking a lot about that because where like AR and like the metaverse has been something on the fringe. Now I feel like a lot of people are talking about it and how do we use those things and how do we interact with our customers virtually and kind of it's no longer about omni-channel, but it's about like shopping without barriers. And so I feel like there's a lot of discussion about that, that nothing has, been solved for, but we're wanting to do that. So it's maybe it's being able to, shop for colors like through Oculus, or it's being able to have access to a customer service person who's able to see what you have on your nightstand, so they could, more customize their recommendations for you. But there seems to be a lot of discussion about how do we use technology to ease the customer experience. And then also something that I'm interested in is how do we use technology, not just for technology's sake, but really to help elevate the values that we're saying that we have as society. And that may be about environmental factors like sustainability, zero waste. It may be about cruelty-free, could be about representation, diversity, inclusivity. And so then how do we use those technologies, like not just to like have like a cool new gadget in store, but to help us to shop based on the values that we're saying that we have as consumers.
That is so, so fascinating. It sounds super futuristic. Like, it sounds like the kind of thing that if you asked someone in the 90s, what do you think we'll be doing in 2023? They would have said something like this. It sounds expensive, a lot of this. So, I mean, hopefully as more of the technology can be developed, they can bring it to ordinary people as well. I'm sure someone's going to have to do a lot of work to sort of develop all of these things. Yeah. But as a consumer, fascinating, so helpful as well.
I'm excited.
Honestly, that sounds so cool. I mean, that half the battle is knowing, all these different things before you make a purchase. Do you know what I mean? Like, what's going to be it's that paralysis that can be really, really hard for people. There's so many options. I don't think there have ever been more options. And it's the tyranny of choice. You think you want more options, but when you do, sometimes that can paralyze you and you don't know what you should get. We get a lot of really, really confused people reaching out and they're like, look, I've heard about this, that, or the other, and I don't know where to start. Like, what is the one thing that's really going to make a difference? So I feel like all of this kind of goes into that to give us the information we will need in real time to actually make informed decisions. So
yes,
I'm excited. 2023, bring it on. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, for chatting with our listeners. I would love, people I'm sure will want to know more about you. Where can they find you? Where can they follow you? Are you on social?
Oh, yes. And my team would die if I didn't promote my social. I have an Instagram account called Sarah Has Landed, and then the app is BeautyFluent Pro. I thank you so much for inviting me. I had such a good time talking to you, getting to know you more, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other, in real life at some point.
Yes, definitely. You'll have to let me know when you're in Korea next. I would love to meet up and chat more about this. Has been absolutely fascinating. So thank you very much. And I hope our listeners have enjoyed this chat.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
I really hope you enjoyed my chat with Sarah today. I find it really fascinating how beauty brands, offline retailers, and even online retailers are using technology, AI, and all of these kind of things. I think Sarah's right. This is definitely the future, the way that the industry is trending. And apps like Sarah's BeautyFluent app is just a really exciting example of this. It's so true too that, if you are working on the beauty floor at one of the offline retailers, it is next to impossible these days with how many products and brands there are to know intimate details of every single thing. And who is more important to know these kind of details than the beauty advisors in store that are actually telling you what you need to know to make an informed purchase? So I think this is fascinating. Well done to Sarah for developing this kind of technology. And I, for one, am super interested to see where this part of the industry goes. But the idea that you would have all of the information that you need at your fingertips really will help ease a lot of the anxiety, particularly I know as someone that, you have to get your head around so many different products, and brands making tweaks and changes, upgrades, and sometimes just altogether throwing out the old and it's in with the new. There's a much quicker cycle that brands are doing these days with their products, and that can make it even more confusing everything. You can't try everything. And, if brands are throwing out products and introducing new ones every 2 years, having this kind of technology at your hands is going to be so much more efficient, so much more effective. So thank you so much to Sarah for joining me today. I would love for you guys to go and follow Sarah, to follow BeautyFluent, and also her company Landing International. I have included all the details in today's show notes for you. Thank you for joining me again, and I will be back in your ears next week for another episode of the Korean Beauty Show podcast.